With that in mind, whenever I acknowledge land, I want to make sure that I'm being responsible to what that means. So for me, acknowledging land means a commitment to being a better community member and working towards accompliceship, which just means that I'm helping Indigenous folks undermine the settler state in the city of Vancouver in any way I can. And that's a work in progress. And I hope that in my acknowledgement and having this acknowledged to you folks tonight, this community, that we work to not only reflect on what it means to be on stolen land, regardless of if we are Indigenous ourselves, if we're MST, or if we are settlers here, or anything in between. I know there's many positionalities. We take our positionality and we reflect on what that means and how we can work as community to make things better for everybody. So that's kind of the goal there. Moving forward, I hope that that's all comfortable, and if it's uncomfortable, reflect on why that is. Moving forward, we're also in the downtown east side, and some of our neighbors here are struggling with the harms of colonialism in a very intimate and visceral way. With that, we ask that you don't increase that harm by calling the police on our neighbors. If you see someone struggling, particularly if you see someone who may be overdosing, feel free to ask myself or Dax for assistance. We're both naloxone trained, and we have a kit on site. Our procedure, generally speaking, is that when we call 911, we ask that police don't arrive. And so it would just be ambulance services, ideally, if things work out the way we hope. If there are any questions about that, feel free to let me know. Lastly, an access note. This is our one washroom. Unfortunately, there's not a push button for the door. There is a handrail next to the toilet. It's single stall. If anyone needs assistance with that tonight, again, feel free to ask. I'm sure whoever you're closest to, or Dax or myself, we're definitely happy to help. Additionally, yeah, thanks so much for being masked. And I think that's all. I think that's everything. Cool. If anyone has any questions again, feel free to let me know. With that, I'm so happy to introduce our readers tonight. And our first reader is Catherine. And Catherine, I'm going to be pulling up your bio. I'm so sorry, it's just going to take me a second. Catherine Lewis, she, her, is a Chinese-Canadian writer and poet. Her debut poetry chapbook, Zipless, 845 Press, 2021, is a finalist for 2 Bisexual Book Awards for poetry and for Bi Writer of the Year. Her work has been published in Prism International, The Humber Literary Review, and Plenitude magazine. First runner-up for Pulp Literature's 2023 Magpie Award for Poetry, and longlisted for Surrey Muse's 2022 Joy Kongawa Award for Fiction. She has been shortlisted in creative nonfiction contests at Broom Magazine and The Fiddlehead. She lives in Vancouver on the unceded territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh peoples. Thank you so much. Welcome, Catherine.
Hi, can everyone hear me now?
Yeah.
Awesome. Big thanks for the wonderful introduction and the land acknowledgement. Incredibly important. Yeah, for those of us who are settlers for sure. As for me, I am so honored to have this amazing opportunity. Big thanks to Massy Arts for hosting us. I think it's my 3rd time reading in this room, so I'm so honored to have such an amazing space in Vancouver. Let's see. Erin and Candie, thank you so much for inviting me to take part in this. I was like blown away to see this message from you folks saying, hey, Kat, you want to read with us? I'm like, okay. Super enthused because I've been big fans for like a long time. So to get the opportunity to read with folks I've admired for so long, it's a huge honor. I will be reading 2 poems from my chapbook, Zipless, from 845 Press. And the first poem is titled Terminological Quibbles. So you've had girlfriends then? She asks, Spanish red wine in hand. I don't think that's the word I would use, I replied. My bare calves tucked under a short skirt, politely sipping the same bread on her roommate's cream brocade couch. I've had a lot of first dates, nothing that ever reached the level of a girlfriend. She claims me the rest of the night with experienced lips and hands, pouting as I leave for cubicle next morning. I'm too ashamed to admit no other woman has tried to kiss me. Online dating stream of micro-rejections filters you out before after pour over coffee. I swipe my card for us both before a waitress's card machine crosses the table. "What, did you just pay for me?" she exclaims. "Thank you so much, I'll get it next time." And I'm surprised that there really is a next date, that when we're out we plan to meet again. Like you, I'm up for anything, I say. She corrects me. I'm not up for anything. I'm up for love. I remain silent, stare down at her in bed, silence her with a kiss. This is the only time we speak of love in any tense but her past. Not once does talk spring from our lips about whether she's my girlfriend. At support group for late blooming sapphics, I try out the term girlfriend. Cringe and giggle when I hear it falter off my lips. I don't know what to call her when people ask how things are going with this girl in C who asked me to come visit her back east during our farewell kiss at Denman and Davie. Last weekend at Dance Studio's party, I spied a pair of ladies kissing. Still of note outside queer women's spaces. I make conversation with the girl I don't know. "Are you with her studio too?" I ask. No, I'm dating Tara." "Yes, of course. Have you tried our dance classes yet?" No, I just moved here from back east." "That's where my ex-girlfriend moved back to," I tell her. Only time I've let this phrase slip past my lips. Ex-girlfriend, the verbal marker that separates me from straight girls who use girlfriend for platonic BFFs. An accidental verbal affront to women who fuck when our romantic relationships are mistaken for just friends. How to casually mention your unexpected orientation according to Google. Just say, "My ex-girlfriend." Shorthand that I'm one of us. Each day of silence stretches us from being long distance, me secretly looking up airfare, to her being my ex-girlfriend who moved away and never got in touch again. So, the second poem I have for you is titled Cupoc. It's a glossa, so it starts with an epigraph. So here goes the epigraph. I begin to see that woman doing things, stirring rice, ironing a skirt, typing a manuscript until dawn. And that's from the poem Translations by Adrienne Rich. The rest is me. August blows in while we live in sundresses, blanket self in rainbows, for I'm the worst Chinese never having seen Dr. Sun Yat-sen classical Chinese garden until Pride in Chinatown tonight. Crowd of Gaetians and allies and circles, youth martial artists soaring in flight, carving through air with gleaming swords. Would it be a bad omen if their weapons were real? Queer line dance team enclosed in yellow traditional costume dodges side to side, sweeping giant lion head with bulging eyes up and down, when I begin to see that woman 50 feet away as line dancers booty shake past her. Alone in dress and heels, expensive good Cantonese daughter pixie cut. When did she get so much prettier since we dated 3 years back? Keep running into Gaysian writers 2 decades younger. They've been gay longer than me, but tonight we're kin in dodging our exes. Dodge and hide, I won't make nice. Passing pagodas, taiko drums, Gaysian party conversations, and cue walk ball cap, I tell friend. I didn't know how much I needed this party. It's doubly marginalized diasporic sacrifice, doing things, stirring rice dreams and rice pride in me. Friend, we needed this. As sky darkens, I recall, I'm not supposed to be here. I'm in my alternate universe. 2 days I undo, moving from Hong Kong as a baby. Meeting my first woman crush at way too old and hetero married for this. Ashamed to be ashamed to sound anti-immigration and like worst gay activist ever. But the labels, Oriental, Asian, minority, ethnic, POC, racialized, are a burden, not borne by my Hong Kong cousins. Their lives, I'll never know. Ladylike laughter, pantyhose, conservative shirts, ironing a skirt, and never once pondering a cure for being Chinese. Queer awakening at 40 after hetero marriage creates a lost baby dyke in her 40s. An embarrassment to marginalized queer community. No gold star for me. Affront to all out since their teens. Event closest to my intersectionality is alternative. A swipe right on me's a quirky substitute for white liaison, a manic pixie dream girl. As final band plays, dress and heels sits alone. I escape solo into pride dance parties across town before carrying on, typing a manuscript until dawn. Thanks so much, everyone.
Next up is C.A. Tanaka. I'm sorry. Just want to double check. Tanaka. Okay, perfect. Is a multiracial trans writer, artist, and librarian, challenging the binaries continually reconstructed between the self and other while exploring archive and memory in a socio-political context. They are a creative writing graduate of the Writer's Studio program at Simon Fraser University and have a BFA in Intermedia from Emily Carr Institute of Art and Design. Their first YA book, Baby Drag Queen, was published with Orca Books in April of 2023. They've also published work in Resonance, Essays on the Craft of the Life and Writing with Anvil Press, and This Will Only Take a Minute, Canadian Flash Fiction with Guernica Editions. Please welcome C.A. Tanaka.
Everyone. everyone. Thanks to Massy, as Catherine has said already, and Catherine and Aaron. I'm so glad I'm reading with you both again, actually, or at different times, but yes. Thank you all for coming tonight. I was wearing my glasses earlier and I was like, oh, I'm feeling like everything's fuzzy right now, so I'll try to make this out best I can. This is my first YA book, actually my first book that actually got published. Baby Drag Queen. It's by Orca book publishers, and they're a really cool publishing house in Victoria. This book is part of their high-low line, so that means that it's for readers that are reading below grade level. So the words are very simple, the sentences are very simple, so please don't judge my writing by this, but I am going to read it tonight because it's a little fun. So this is chapter 9. When Ichiro gets home after his shift, the lights aren't on. This means his mother is still not home. She puts on every light she can when she's home alone. It's after 11. She's usually not this late. Ichiro is looking forward to relaxing a bit. His shift tomorrow doesn't start until 5 in the afternoon. He's got homework to do, but he's going to play some video games until his mom gets home. He wonders again what she wants to tell him. He hopes his grandpa is okay. Mom hasn't mentioned his grandparents recently. He throws the stuff on his bed. Instead of playing video games, he decides to go into his mother's room. He looks at all the lipsticks lined up on her vanity table. He picks one that doesn't look like it gets used much. She might not notice it's missing. He goes back to his room and locks the door. Standing in front of the mirror, he applies it carefully to see how it looks. Not bad. He looks up some drag tutorials on YouTube. Wow, there's so much to learn. So many different kinds of makeup. He's going to start with the basics. Then there are the outfits. He won't need to worry about padding at least. He's also glad he doesn't have to tuck in any balls. It all sounds difficult. He's a quick learner though. He'll probably need a wig too. This is actually going to cost him some of his savings for the camper van. He starts practicing his dance routine and lip syncing. It's tough going. He's just a baby drag queen. He needs a lot of help. He checks his email. His first paycheck from the cafe has come in. He looks at the pay stub. A lot has been taken off for taxes. The total is not as much as he was hoping for, especially for all that work. He sits on the edge of his bed and covers his face with his hands. He needs to think about how he's going to be able to do this. His shifts at the cafe and some banquets at school are helping a bit, but he might not have enough in a few months for the down payment. He's starting to feel desperate. He decides to talk to Sam's friend and see if there's any other work he can do at the club on the youth nights. He hears his mom's keys in the door. Mom, you're so late. She comes over to give Ichiro a hug. Then she takes off her jacket and collapses on the couch. She pats the cushion beside her. Come, sit. Let's talk about that vehicle. What's it called? A camper van, Ichiro says. We buy one and move to the island. I have money saved up. Show me what you mean, she says. Ichiro goes and grabs his laptop. It's small, but we'd only use it for sleeping. There are campgrounds with showers if we move around. This one comes with a portable toilet and sink. Too small, she says. But think of the freedom. You can quit your job and look for something else while I work and go to uni. No, Ichiro, you should be enjoying life with your friends. She trails off as she stares at him. What's on? Are you wearing lipstick? Ichiro realizes too late that he's forgotten to take it off. Yes, Mom, it's for a show. I'm thinking of doing drag. There's a club that... Drag? A club? What do you mean? No daughter of mine is going to a place like that. She makes a funny sour face and shakes her head. Mom, I'm trans. Ichiro feels like he might die. What does that mean? She sounds angry. For me, it means I'm not your daughter. I'm your child, but I'm not a girl. Ichiro, what are you saying? Why are you making my life difficult right now? I can't take this. At this youth club, I can make some extra money. You will not be going to that club. It's not a big deal, it's work. He shrugs his shoulders. Well, then I'm going to start dating my boss. It's what he wants, and it will make our lives easier. No, Mom, he's glaring at her. Yes, I have to, only for now. He's not that bad. I'll find another job soon. Just wait, please. I'll have enough money for a down payment soon. Auntie Edna said, stop. I don't want to hear any more about her. She's going to help so that we can stop it right now, she yells. But he can't give up. You have to let me do this. Let me help you. No, you stop now. She sounds as if she's going to cry. I'm going to the club and see what Sam's friend has to say. You will not be going to that club, Ichiro. This is going nowhere. Ichiro stomps to his room and slams the door. He is old enough to make his own choices. Although he's always listened to his mother, now he has no choice but to defy her. He can hear him standing outside his door. Ichiro starts playing a video game. He won't be sleeping or doing any homework tonight. His mother bangs on his door and she tries to open it. She's never been this mad before. He can hear her sobbing outside his door, but he can't open it tonight. After a few minutes, she finally leaves. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you for sharing. Okay, our third and final writer is Aaron Chan. He is a writer born and raised on unceded Coast Salish territory, Vancouver. He is the author of This City is a Minefield from Signal 8 Press, a collection of memoir and personal essays about growing up gay and Asian in Vancouver. Currently, Aaron is a creative writing MFA candidate at the University of California, Riverside, and is the recipient of the L.M. and Marsha McKern Endowed Graduate Award in Nonfiction Writing. The Broken Heart, his debut children's picture book, is forthcoming in June 2024 with Rocky Pond Books. Welcome, Aaron.
Sure. Hello, everyone. I'm going to echo the same thank yous as Candie and Kat. Thank you all for being here on this Friday evening, lovely Friday evening. I want to thank Massy for hosting us and for organizing this event and giving us space here to be gay and queer and Asian, yeah. So I'm going to be reading from my book, The City is a Minefield. This chapter is called Underworld and is about the time that I went to a bathhouse. So, well, it's not yet. I don't know why I'm here. Before I left home, I told myself it was because I didn't want to listen to my mom's grating voice anymore while she yelled on the phone. On the SkyTrain, I convinced myself that my soul aches, that after years of searching and countless failed attempts at dating, this is the final place where I have to be able to find the cure to my hurt, a fellow soul to connect with and relate to. And as I walked over, I admitted that I might simply be horny and wanting to fool around with other guys, something I didn't get a chance to do when I visited with a friend last week. What I do know, as I stand before the grand, weathered wooden doors, ones that look like a gate to another realm, is that it's probably a bad idea to enter, but it feels too late to turn back. It could be that I've come all this way and don't want to leave for nothing, but the doors somehow suck me in, as if I've strayed too close to its gravitational field, and now I'm falling in, crashing. I should go, I think, as I grasp the handle and pull the door open. Yet I can't. Inside the dim lobby is a window with a space between it and the counter below to pass money and cards through. It reminds me of the movie theater's box office. I make out the muffled bass beats of a dance track beyond the metal door next to the window. It sounds vacuous, void of feeling, and I don't understand why they play music like that here. Then again, I can't imagine what it would be like to have good music like Sarah McLachlan or Debussy playing on the speakers overhead while I'm sucking off a stranger. Could I just get a locker, please? I ask the guy standing behind the spotless glass. He has dark stubble and wears a friendly smile, his hair neatly combed and slicked with gel. The patches on his pressed gray uniform make him look like an auto mechanic. One stitched on the left of his shirt reads, Freddie. Sure, do you have a membership? Clumsily, I retrieve the student membership card I signed up for last week. Freddie punches in the info and charges me the fee for the locker. Behind me, the doors open and traffic noise spills in. I don't turn around to see who it is. I'm too afraid to meet their eyes, for them to see me as I see them. Yet another sleazy gay guy looking for an anonymous fuck. I know that's not me. Come on in. There's a buzz and a mechanical switch as the door unlocks. I funnel through to the other side as if on a river. 3 older men, 2 completely naked and 1 with a towel, swivel their 3 heads at me simultaneously and stare. I look away. Many Asian younger guys are into older white men, but that has never been the case for me. I've always been interested in men around my age or younger. Race has never been a factor for me. Combined with years of being fetishized and objectified by older, bigger, white men, they make me feel like prey in their eyes, in their big, groping hands, about to be devoured whole. Your locker number is 434, Freddie informs me, placing a key on a folded, dryer-warm towel on the counter. In Chinese culture, the number 4 is a bad luck number, a homophone for death. I try not to think about how my mom would immediately demand another locker, or her disgust if she saw me here at all. In the locker area, I strip and cover myself with the towel like everyone else. Glasses on or off, I debate internally. People seem to think glasses aren't attractive. God knows some of the shallowest people I've ever met are gay men, but I decide to leave them on. I know how dark it is around. Okay, well, I'm here, but I can still have a good night. I have the power to do that, to say no if I need to. We'll just take it easy, relax a bit, and see where things go. Let's start with the steam room. Kept off over, after locking up my clothes, I tread on the wet brown tiles of the shower area, where a few men are bathing comfortably as if they shower next to other nude men all the time. A burst of hot vapor hits me when I open the steam room door. It's quiet. Although the steam effectively renders my glasses useless, I make out the outlines of others nearby. They look like ghosts. The steam makes them seem translucent. I sit down and imagine what it would be like if the steam weren't there, if it were just a room full of mostly naked men sitting around in silence. No one touches each other. No one says anything. We sit there, waiting for something to happen, praying the next guy coming in brings some action with him. But nothing happens. Which is fine for me because I'm satisfied relaxing and sweating in the steam. This night might not be so bad after all. After a while, I need to breathe, so I take a quick shower and decide to go for a stroll around the main floor. Across from the showers are steps leading up to a bubbling hot tub, where the heads and shoulders of 3 people seem to float above the water motionless. In the faded light, the water appears dirty, tinged brown. Just outside one of the 2 doors to the joined shower jacuzzi space is a short row of private rooms. I suspect these rooms must be the most expensive, ones with the largest, comfiest beds and other perks. I haven't seen anyone enter or exit these doors. I wonder if I'll ever be invited into one. There are a couple guys in the small gym area working out. One of them is heaving a barbell naked. Light fur covers his chest and legs. A muscular cub, if I had to choose a label. Based on previous interactions with the same kind of guy, I'm willing to bet my life that I'm not his type, so I move on, trying to ignore feeling disappointed. Close by, there's the clanging of lockers,
unzipping of zippers, unbuckling of belts before they knock on benches, shoes scuffing the floor as they're kicked off. I poke my head in to see the new arrivals, feeling a thrill run through me like a lit fuse. When I realize what I'm doing, being a creepy voyeur like the other men, I have to leave. A few paces away, concealed by a curtain, is what resembles a black, glory hole type structure that I don't go near. It looks sketchy. Some men lounge in leather seats, ogling those who walk by. Next to the stairs, 2 wooden picnic tables are opposite a large high-definition flat-screen TV, but no one is watching. Freddie and his co-workers are laughing and joking amongst themselves and other half-covered men nearby. A stout, hairy man with a belly peruses the options of anal douches and hoses in a vending machine. Receding hairlines and wrinkles suggest the average age in here is maybe mid-40s. Everything feels so bizarre, like an alternate dimension that operates on its own rules, its own logic. Should I relate to all this because I'm gay? But there's nothing here that I can identify with, aside from the commonality of sex with men. It all makes me doubt again the reason for my presence. Leave it there. Okay, so we are now going to, each of us are going to speak on the publication journeys of our books. And then we are going to kind of talk about it conversationally, ask each other questions about it, and then we will open it up for questions at the end. Yes. Let's grab some chairs.
Y'all can hear me. Awesome, thank you. As for me, okay, there's a button pressing over my accent. Hi, can you hear me, or did I turn this off by accident? Hello? Okay, all right, I'm going to speak up. So as for me and my publication journey for my chapbook Zipless, well, big thanks to my publisher, 845 Press, for taking me on. So the thing is, it kind of started on a whim. At the end of my year at SFU's Writer's Studio in 2019, I was the only one of my poetry classmates who hadn't started submitting work yet for publication to publishers, to journals, to contests, what have you. I just wasn't ready. Basically publicly sharing work about my infertility, about my late blooming queer sexuality. I was not ready to publicly share work like that yet. My mentors insisted. 2020 came along, there was a pandemic. I was still being mentored over this time, over Zoom, and I started to take baby steps. These are the baby steps they wanted. And at December 2020, I attended a Zoom Christmas party being hosted by my TWS poetry mentor, Joanne Arnott. And I met all her 2020 students that day. And they were all talking about submitting chapbooks. And I thought, I think I can do this. Yeah, maybe let's just look into it, give it a try. And what the contest they ultimately ended up mentioning happened to have a deadline. About a week later, I said, I can throw together like 10 poems, right? So, on a fairly last minute basis, I threw 10 poems into a Word document, sent it off. I did not place, but I did this with a few other publishers. Let's see, one other publisher in Canada one contest in the US. And then the fourth Canadian publisher I sent it to, 3 of the poems had been revised through ARC Poetry's Poet in Residence program, where Jim Johnstone was kind enough to give me some amazing feedback. And I threw in one more poem. I titled the manuscript Zipless, and I sent it off to a 4th Canadian publisher. And 2 months later, I get this email back that says, we would love to publish this. And I was astounded. I had not even had a poem accepted by a journal before. I'd gotten one poem published in Poetry Pause, League of Canadian Poets, online. That was very special. It was about infertility, and I'd been very skittish about being public about my personal struggles, but realizing how kind everyone was about the infertility and seeing my work, that helped a lot. But yes, so I had to look at this chapbook contract from a publisher that I had approached because I'd had women of color friends publish in their online journal, and that's why I've known to send my work there. And I deliberated all weekend, am I really ready to be out as a queer writer? And in the end, like a few days later, the allure of publication sucked me in. I signed the contract. I started putting pride flags on all my social media profiles. That was pretty much it. They've been great to work with. I've been super honored, and I wasn't sure how I would feel about everything, but in the end, I feel really welcomed into the community of poets, writers, but especially queer writers, especially fellow BIPOC writers, especially Asian writers. So to be here as part of a queer Asian panel is really incredibly special to me. Yeah, so that's my publication journey so far. And it is a chapbook, meaning you don't approach the same process that you do for a full-length book, so it's a very different journey from the journeys I'm going to hear from Erin and Candie. So which of you wants to go next?
I have questions.
Oh yes, bring it on.
Did you feel pressured to you mentioned that your classmates and your mentors at the writer studio were, well, your classmates were getting work published, and then your mentors encouraged you to submit your work. Did you feel pressure to like send your stuff out because everyone else was doing it?
So there was a part of me that said, I'm really shy, and yet there was a part of me that, like, when I got up and read, say, the mandatory publication class anthology, I felt alive when I was doing it. I knew it's like, you know what? I didn't come here to not publish work. The thing is, I wasn't sure when I would be publishing or when I would feel ready. I don't think I would have, it's quite possible it would have been a different journey had 2020 not happened, because I realized, well, I'm going to be reading on Zoom. It's going to be very different from actually dealing with the world in person. Yeah, I can transition into being a more public writer that's starting in virtual space. But I definitely felt a sense of being behind. I would see my classmates posting about their latest accomplishments, etc. And just because I wasn't necessarily ready to publicly share my work doesn't mean I wasn't jealous.
Can you give me questions?
Sure, I'll ask you. Well, I mean, it's interesting to hear about your journey because, you know, especially too that you felt that it was the right time for you to sort of, you know, express your, you know, whole identity of yourself. I'm just wondering too, now, how do you, is there something that's going to propel you to write something sort of different, like something because of this new identity that you have, you're starting to feel more comfortable in? Is it going to, do you think, be easier for you to write from that positionality? Or, you know, for poetry, I know it's a little bit different, but are you working on something else besides poetry? There's a couple questions mixed in there, so feel free to answer whatever you like.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for the insightful questions, Candie. And I would say that I actually started writing to wrestle with coming to terms with my newfound queer sexuality in my 40s. If that had not happened, I'm actually not sure I would be writing at all, but I was very stressed out over it. There was a lot of crying. It's not an identity one typically realizes at over age 35 or necessarily. I envy everyone who has been out since their teens. But the fact is, I was crying into my diary until I ended up at a creative writing program. And so I've actually written from it the whole time I've identified as a writer. But whether I was comfortable sharing it outside my very small poetry workshop group at PWS of just 8 fellow women writers who were all very loving and supportive and kind. From the very first page of the very first poem I submitted to my class, it was all super queer. Was I comfortable discussing that with the other classmates? It took a while. And let alone with the broader community, let alone on a space like this, let alone sending out anywhere. So I've actually always been writing queer work. It was the sharing part. As for me, I am working on submitting a poetry full manuscript, and I do have a memoir manuscript that is, I've basically not been working on it for a while, but the fact is exactly a month ago tonight I read like a 3,400 word excerpt that was published in Prism that was pretty queer and pretty sexy. So, yeah.
I have one more question. So you mentioned that you had a few rejections before it was ultimately accepted for publication. I want to focus on the rejections because I'm all about the negative. How did you feel about that, and did you receive any feedback, and did you feel did those rejections at all affect you sending it out again?
Let's see. So I did not receive any feedback on any. So far, let's see. I think there was 2. One of them was an American contest. It's just a generic decline in submittable. One of them was a Canadian contest. I think it's a 1-line rejection. The other one was a polite generic form rejection, and that's pretty much it. And I remember thinking, well, my mentor said early on, just expect mostly rejection at the beginning. They told me they actually weren't very concerned, because when I said, I have concerns about sharing, I have concerns about publication, they said, well, it's mostly rejection at the start, and no one's going to read it anyway. I love that they phrased it this way, because it's poetry, which has a different market than, say, a best-selling novel. Poetry, I was told early on in my poetry studies, well, the market for poetry is primarily other poets. And even someone like Evelyn Lau would tell us how many copies of her book had sold, as celebrated as she is, but the fact is, not a lot of people buy poetry. I looked and said, okay, so it's not like this is going to end up, somewhere in a wider market than I'm necessarily comfortable with. But the fact is, I accepted those form rejections and just said, what else? I had to learn to deal with that and just absorb it.
That's great.
Thanks, Catherine. I also got my start at the TWS Writer Studio. When I was younger, I did start to write a little bit as well. I remember sitting at the kitchen table and I wrote a Christmas story for the Vancouver Sun many years ago, and my mom actually read it and she said, oh, this is really good, you should send it in. I don't think I ever did because I was just too young, I didn't know what to do. I used to write some stuff as well for friends, kind of like romance, like short little romance things, and then I just never thought that as an Asian person I could be a writer. Like all the writers that I saw, in my time were always white, usually male, and not really living in Vancouver. They were Americans or whatever, so, the only one I can think of was, who was it, down in San Francisco, Amy Tan, I think it was, that I was like, oh, this is cool. So, I did go to San Francisco with my sister and like hung out where Amy Tan was. And then for the longest time, my life has mostly been just about working, getting by, with traveling, things like that. And then I got back into art, basically got into art school, did that for a while, really enjoyed that. And then I just started thinking more creatively. Like I've always been a creative person. And I had this weird, this weird sort of happenstance. I don't know if I've ever really actually said this out loud to very many people, but I was living on Commercial Drive for a while, and I used to get postal mail for this person named Wade Compton. And I was like, Wade Compton? I was like, that name sounds really familiar, right? I'm like, Wade Compton? I kept thinking, who's this guy? And I remember looking him up, and seeing that it was the same place that I had been looking at earlier, this writing school, which is the writer's studio. And I thought, oh, this is what I've been kind of looking for. And I lived in the same apartment that Wade did, I guess, which is above this old Italian restaurant at the time. And that sort of like pushed me towards the writer's studio a little bit more. I thought, maybe it's my fate that I need to go to the writer's studio. So anyways, I did go. I really enjoyed my time there. I actually got accepted into the nonfiction cohort. So when you do go to the writer's studio, you submit your work, you sort of put down your preference for what cohort you want to get into, but they decide where they put you. And that's actually the same with Banff, Writer's Residency. I think I applied for, maybe I did apply for something, but anyways, I did get put into the poetry at Banff. And with TWS, I was in nonfiction, but I think what's interesting as a writer is like, you don't necessarily have to stick to one genre. So, you can decide, as you go along. But so I went through the writer's studio, and Wade was actually one of the people that had me do some of the social media work for the writer's studio. So I did the TWS Twitter chats and the sprints. I worked at the library as well and sort of involved in the writing community that way. And I remember I was helping out with the Vancouver Comic Arts Festival and, just really getting along with the people there. And what happened was sort of a happenstance is that they were short of a moderator or a host for an event. It was kind of last minute. And one of the things I always tell people is like, try not to turn down those opportunities that sort of just come up. Like even if you're super scared or whatever, just try and make it happen. So I thought, okay, I'm gonna do this thing. I had to read 3 YA novels within like, I don't know, maybe 2 weeks or something. And YA was not really my forte or not where I had sort of ventured before. And so I read these 3 novels, met some really great authors, 3 YA authors, and we all kept in touch through social media. And one of the authors, Tash, who's a trans author living here in Vancouver, reached out to me and said, hey, you know what, why don't you do some pitches, to Orca? And I was like, for YA? I was like, YA? I never really thought about YA. But YA is actually a super popular genre. I should know that. I work in the library. And so anyways, I sent some pitches to an editor, and she's like, you know what, I like this one. And I was like, okay, and it was Baby Drag Queen. So that's how I started writing it, and it was definitely such a good process. Like, I do have a main manuscript. I always call my main manuscript. It's actually a fiction manuscript. I sent it off to a few places, and I did get a lot of early interest, asking me for like a full. So that's when you send out a partial manuscript, the first maybe 20 pages or a chapter, and then they say, oh, we want a full, so you get excited. It's like a full request, right? I'm like, oh my God, so soon? But this wasn't really that soon. It was still like years after the writer's studio. But I had just started to send it out, and and then I got disappointed after the full request. It was like a rejection. I'm like, okay. But then I did get a few comments on a couple other places that I submitted. So my main manuscript, I'm still trying to get published, but this YA novel was great because I was able to basically go from pitch to publication. So it was just like a really good process, a really good, great learning process. So that's how I got started.
I have questions. So it sounds like you had an in with Orca through Tash. Is that correct? Or can anyone just pitch to this editor?
I basically, I did have a contact name, and that unfortunately that editor has now left Orca. But different places take pitches all the time. You just check on their website and you can see. But yeah, that was what happened for me. It was just kind of like a connection, I guess. It's possible we could have said no, but I think just the Baby Drag Queen one is a very topical subject right now. So I think, Orca was smart in choosing that one.
Did you feel like when you were pitching, did you specifically want to pitch something that was like queer and or Asian to Orca? How cognizant were you of that, or were you like, I should try and pitch them stuff that is kind of more generic, not generic, but more has wider appeal, let's say, or were you like, oh well, whatever, like I may as well just like pitch them whatever I want to write? What was your process with that?
Well, I think that's my problem, is like with my main manuscript too, it's very focused on being multiracial and trans, and there's really not that much publication, especially for multiracial Asian and trans people right now, and I don't see very much in the market at all, really. So I think when, unfortunately, publishers really look at who's going to get, who the buyers are, who the purchases are, and they think about marketability. So, that being said, I think they need to give other identities and other, racial identities too a chance. Because one thing I think about all the time is that Everything Everywhere All at Once. Who thought that was going to be so big? And it's just kind of like those sort of niche markets. You don't really know what the public wants until you actually try something. So, but when I did pitch it to Orca, I wanted it to be about a trans Asian character, and I specifically made all the characters' friends, all the main other characters' friends, all also multiracial as well, and all queer. And that's what I wanted. And they were telling me there's not very many YA books that actually do that. So, I thought about sort of like, what people usually say is I thought about the book that I would want to read when I was growing up. And so that's why I pitched it that way. And I was just really happy that Orca took it, because I feel like they were taking a big chance with it. And I'm just really happy that they did it. So.
Let's see, I would love to hear more about your TWS experience and your main manuscript.
Well, I'm not going to talk too much about my main manuscript, because I always feel like it's sort of like the energy sort of dissipates from it, but it is a multiracial trans character, and it is a fiction novel. And like I mentioned, I was accepted into the nonfiction cohort, and I started writing it basically to be a nonfiction, and then at some point I pivoted and wanted to try a different genre, just because I think it actually fits it better and allowed me a little bit more freedom while I was writing. My TWS experience was good for many things. It was really good for community. That's the one thing I always say about TWS, is like, it's so great to have connections with other writers and other mentors, and just to learn about the writing community overall. So that's what I think from there, and I can't, that was my biggest thing. And then two, some of the techniques we learned there were good, but I think a lot of it is like, kind of like when I was going to art school. It's like, you basically get out of school what you put into it. So like at art school, we had some instructors that would basically put on a movie and leave the room, and then we were all just sitting there trying to learn how to draw or whatever, and I was like, oh my goodness. So that's what school is. I feel like if you go in there and you get some direction, but you basically make connections with community, and then from there on you sort of design your own education around that. Like, even if instructors just recommend a few books or whatever, sometimes that's the sort of thing that you just need to get going on your journey.
Okay, so I did not go to the writer's studio. Sorry, but it sounds great. And how did this book come to be? I went to Langara for a few years. I took some creative writing courses there. Found that nonfiction was super awesome because I love writing about myself. And it just felt very like freeing and cathartic in a way, because I felt like I had all these stories and I felt very misunderstood as a queer Asian person. And I felt by writing all of it, I could just finally explain myself for once. And that people, if they didn't understand me, I could be like, well, read this, and then you'll understand me. So the first piece, so this is, my book is a collection of like standalone pieces. And the first piece I wrote, that's in here, I wrote in 2009. But I didn't intend to write a book at that point, I was just writing stuff. And then I applied for the BFA program at UBC, was told by my classmates that it was incredibly difficult to get into, and some of my classmates did not get in, and I was like, oh, no, I'm not gonna get in, they're not gonna get in. And then I got in, which was like bewildering to me. Spent 2 years there, because it's a 2-year program. And then after I took a creative nonfiction course with Andreas Schroeder, who was amazing. He really inspired me to write a book afterwards, to write a memoir as my first book. I find fiction very difficult to write. I don't know how people do it. I find novels like the most difficult thing that anyone could write. So I really felt inspired to write a memoir, and after graduation in 2014, I buckled down and I wrote a whole bunch of like pieces. And I put them all together. Well, actually, this originally this was a mixed genre book with like poetry in there as well, in between, interspersed with the pieces. People did not seem to like that, so I took the poetry out. And then I sent the manuscript around. Rejections from everyone. I was sending primarily to Canadian publishers and literary agencies to try and get an agent. Everyone said no. I didn't receive feedback from anyone except for one publisher who said that it didn't feel cohesive, and I was like, I don't know how to fix that. And one other publisher who said that they don't have a track record of publishing a memoir by a first-time writer, which made me doubt like my project and made me think like, should I have written a novel first? I don't want to write a novel. So I took a break from it for a while after submitting it around for a few years and doing edits, and then I took about a year off, submitted other stuff, got some other stuff published, and then it just like, I just felt that urge to like, this book was like calling for me, and it was like, I want to be birthed, and I was like, fine. So I picked it up again after a year, did some more edits, sent it around again with renewed vigor and perhaps naivete, and got a ton of rejections again. And I'm generally like, I expected the rejections, like I was fully prepared for it, and after 10 rejections, sure, 20 rejections, oh, and then after 30 plus rejections, I was like, because no one was giving me detailed feedback of any sort, it really started getting to me, and I started wondering about why. I created a lot of questions in my head. Maybe I'm just like a bad writer. Maybe my writing style is really bad. Maybe my experiences aren't worth sharing, because there were basically 0 books, memoirs written by like queer Asian writers, and like 0 by like Canadian writers as well. So it really like, I think it's like submitting a manuscript or a proposal, I suppose, because you submit proposals for nonfiction books. When you're submitting proposals for a nonfiction book, especially if it's a memoir, like it's very hard not to take it personally, because it's your experiences. And so I really tried not to take it personally, but it like did start to get to me and cause a lot of self-doubt. And then eventually, I guess it was 2018 at this point, I submitted a piece to a publisher in Hong Kong that was putting together an anthology of nonfiction work. And I heard back from them and they said, cool, you got in. We're going to include your thing in the anthology. But also, in your piece, you mentioned that you have written a memoir. Have you actually written a memoir? And if so, can you send it to me? Because I would love to read it. And immediately I was like, yay, wait. Is this a trick? Are they actually just going to reject me anyways after this? Because I don't know if I can take it anymore. So I sent it to them, and he got back to me in a couple of weeks, which is very fast, I will say. Like, you generally wait like 6 to 8 months for a no. And he said, I read it all, I loved it, and I want to publish it. And I felt so validated because, you know, at this point I had been sending it out for years and just no one seemed to want it. And for someone to want to share my stories with the world and see the value in it was incredibly validating. So I worked with this publisher, Signal 8 Press, super tiny publisher in Hong Kong, and it was published in 2019. Cried when I got my first copy and held it in my hand. So it's like, you know, essentially a 10-year journey from the first piece that I wrote in 2009 to publication in 2019. And I don't know what the reception has been for either of your books. Maybe we could talk about that. But I was super touched getting messages from folks around the world, just like even, especially some that said like, I read your book, I loved it so much, I related to it so much in a way that I haven't with any other book that I've read. And I really want to thank you for writing it. And that made me feel like all the struggles of trying to get this thing published and all the rejections was worth it. Question?
First off, I am one of those people who love this book. I remember when it came out, I tweeted a photo of myself reading it. I think on public transit, possibly. You can find it in my Twitter feed. Obviously it was signed years ago, but I remember also grilling you when I would run to it, didn't know your readings, and asking about your publication journey, because I was equally intrigued as someone who has a queer Chinese-Canadian memoir manuscript potentially, and knowing what you know now, what would you have done differently?
I would have hired an editor, first and foremost. After I got it published, I was not advised, but like I don't remember where I read it or who told me, but someone was like, generally, before you submit to publishers, you like send your work, you hire an editor to go through it, and they give you feedback, and they give you notes about what you might be able to change and work on, which I did not do. I just trusted that it was good, which was not enough. So I should have done that. I don't think I should have, in terms of sending it out to anyone, I don't think I would have changed anything. I think that I'll give you all a tip, which is when you're sending your stuff out, don't send it to a publisher that doesn't publish that stuff. Don't send poetry to a publisher that doesn't publish poetry, and you're just wasting everyone's time is wasted. I very carefully looked at every publisher and literary agency's submission guidelines, and I tailored all my proposals that way. I thought that would get me an in. I guess not. I don't know. What else would I do differently? I don't know. I think that's about it. Yeah.
I remember talking to you, because Aaron and I actually worked at the library together, so I remember talking to Aaron in the early days when you were still working on getting it published and seeing, you know, feeling the disappointment and then your happiness when you told me that you found a publisher. I'm just wondering, like, you know, that because the process is exhausting. Like 10 years is really exhausting. I mean, I'm going on the same kind of like timeline for my, you know, what I'm calling my main manuscript. It's like probably like 8 years now. So what, were you about to give up at some point? Or did you, and did you start writing another manuscript while you're trying to, you know, get this one published? Because that's what I find is a challenge as well. Like, you spend so much time, it's almost like another part-time job, you know, finding an agent or looking, you know, for a publisher, that it can be exhausting. So then do you have time to like work on something else while you're, you know, putting this one out there at that, you know, during that point at all?
I'm not a very good multitasking writer. I have been told to work on multiple projects at the same time, but I just pour everything into one project usually. There were many times when I was very close to giving up. When I shelved this for a year, I thought like there was a chance I would just never get around to submitting it again. But like again, like it just like called to me, and it was like I just really felt like it was really important to get this out there. I don't think I was working on that much. Like for nonfiction proposals, it can be very time consuming to go through and put them together, because it's not just like you send them a chunk of your manuscript. You have to do a summary and like a marketing kind of like comparison and like a chapter breakdown, and as I like also publishers and literary agencies will want different things from you, so you really should like tailor your proposal to whatever they want. And you're right, like it did feel like when I was putting it together, like it was my job, it was my writing job, writing these proposals and working on them for like a couple weeks before sending them out, and then like going on to the next proposal and reworking the one that I had. And it was exhausting, yeah. I remember, I'm gonna go back to the giving up question. I remember one night after a very long day of working on proposals, and I sat with my mom on the couch, and she sat next to me, and she like, so I worked at the kitchen table, and she would just see me working, sitting there for like many hours a day. And she sat next to me, and we started talking about it, and she said, you know, you can give up. And that was heartbreaking for me, because I just felt like she didn't know what I was working on. I don't think she really cared. She just knew it was writing. And it also felt like she didn't believe in me, which I guess tracks with her, sadly. And I told her, like, you know, like, I'm gonna keep trying for another few years, and if it doesn't, like, if I cannot get it published, I will give up, and I will go and try and do other things. Maybe I'll become a librarian, because that's where all the money is. That's not where the money is. But it was like, to me, this was the project. If I couldn't get this published, then I had other, you know, smaller projects like children's book manuscripts that I was sending out and also getting rejections for, but there wasn't any sort of other big writing project that I was really passionate about besides this one. And so I felt like if I can't get this published, then I don't think I want to get anything else published. I think I would just like give up on my writing and do something else. And I'm really glad that it worked out for me, even if it was published by an international publisher who has limited reach here in Canada, just because like it's led to other opportunities for me. It's led to an agent that was like very kind of fluke how that all happened. And it's led to my, like that picture book manuscript finally is coming to see the light of day. It's getting published next year in June. And so now it really feels like, okay, I think I I've cobbled together some semblance of a writing career. I think I'm doing it, right? I feel a lot more confident about where things are going.